What's up, everybody? Welcome to our San Diego Comic-Con live panel, Mark Waid and the Future of Humanoids. My name is Karama Horne, aka the Blur Girl, and I will be your moderator today. I am a New York-based live host, content creator, and podcaster and culture journalist, and contributing editor to Sci-Fi Wire. My beat is basically at the intersection of geekdom and diversity, and I basically get mail on Twitter. I was really honored when Humanoids reached out to ask me to moderate this panel because I know many of the panelists and I own many of the comics that we're going to be talking about. So this is fun for me. So let me get started by introducing everybody. First up, Mark Waid. Hi, Mark.
Hey, how you doing this morning?
Great. Now, Mark Waid is a New York Times best-selling author who, over the course of his almost 4 decades in comics, has written and edited over 2,000 comic titles and has received every major award in the industry. Mark has developed characters and stories for Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, The Avengers, Iron Man, X-Men, Wonder Woman, Daredevil, and a ton of other franchises. Kingdom Come, which he created for DC Comics, is one of the highest selling graphic novels in history to date. And if you're a fan of the Flash series on the CW, then you've seen Mark's work because many storylines and characters that he created in his 8-year run on the Flash are featured in the show. In 2018, Mark co-founded H1, the imprint under Humanoids. And in February of this year, Mark was named Humanoids' new publisher, overseeing creative, editorial, marketing, and sales. He is also who this panel is named for, so be nice.
Yeah.
Next up, Ibrahim Moustafa. What's up, Ibrahim?
I'm really excited to go after Mark. Thanks.
You're welcome. No problem. Ibrahim is an illustrator and comic book writer / artist from Portland, Oregon. Best known for his Eisner-nominated comics Jaeger and High Crimes, as well as his work on titles such as James Bond and DC's Mother Panic. He has been published by DC Entertainment, Marvel Comics, Image Comics, Dynamite Entertainment, Dark Horse Comics, Boom Studios, Valiant Entertainment, and IDW Publishing. And in my opinion, Ibrahim is actually one of the most underrated creatives in the game. Go read Moon Knight and Jaeger. I'm serious. Go read Moon Knight and Jaeger back to back and tell me I'm wrong.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next up is Melody. Hi, Melody.
Hi.
Now, Melody Cooper was weaned on sci-fi, horror, and comic books. A playwright, film, and TV director and writer, Melody is a staff writer on the second season of the CW's 2-sentence horror stories, The Insiders, a new series headed by Greg Grunberg on Legion M's Twitch channel, and she's developing a sci-fi project with HBO. Melody's supernatural thriller, The Sound of Darkness, won fellowships from Tangerine Entertainment and AMC Network's Shutter Labs and was a 2018 Athena List finalist. Sweet Mercy, her play about the genocide in Rwanda, was developed by New York Stage and Film, starring Denai Guerrera, Black Panther. Y'all remember her. She's a member of the Orchard Project's 2020 Liveness Lab, a think tank focused on how to utilize new technology to enhance creative work. Next up, we have Joe Illidge. Hi, Joe. Oh, he's got to.
Hey, everyone. How you doing?
Got to unmute first. Sorry.
Yep, and I got to do what I'm supposed to do and raise my hand.
Joe Illidge is co-managing editor for Heavy Metal Magazine, the seminal illustrated magazine and company for science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and a freelance comic book and graphic novel editor for various clients, working with writers and artists from around the globe to develop books celebrating heroism and inclusion. Joseph's first job in the comic book industry was at Milestone Media, Inc., the groundbreaking comic book publisher of inclusive superhero stories and creators of the award-winning animated series Static Shock from Warner Brothers. In his career, Joseph has served as the first editor of color on the Batman line of comics for DC Entertainment, executive editor for the Valiant Entertainment universe and line of monthly comic books, and senior editor for Line Forge Comics, where he spearheaded Catalyst Prime, the multicultural superhero comic book imprint. Meredith Laxton. Last but not least, we got you, Meredith.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Meredith is a freelance illustrator dedicating her career to sequential art and comics that promote diversity and mental health awareness. Before comics, Meredith developed award-winning educational animation for university-level students, as well as concept art and 2D assets for video game publishers such as Puny Human, In Exile Entertainment, and other independent developers. More recently, Meredith's venture into comics has led her to create with Humanoids, Source Point Press, and IDW. So this is like a full house today. Welcome. So I am really excited because I know all the work that everybody's done, but I want to dive right in and get into what Humanoids is doing. Now, I have known Humanoids as basically having a really long history in Europe of pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo since the 70s with giants such as Jodorowsky and Mobius. Like, how does the humanoid ethos translate stateside now? Like, this is a different sort of, I don't know if we've turned a corner, but it's definitely a different leveling up, I think, of the brand. So how is it different now? Or what are we doing to extend that ethos?
Well, I mean, it extends in the sense that it goes to the issue that there's a hunger out there for more than just capes and cowls, just more than guys in spandex suits, which has been the majority of comic sales forever. And, we've shown, Image Comics and other publishers have shown in the last few years that there really is a substantial market beyond that. And Humanoids is tailor-made for that. I mean, that's what we do, is not that stuff. We do science fiction, we do horror, we do fantasy, and we do stuff that really isn't, as I say, about, spandex and capes and cowls.
Now, back in it was 2018 that H1 imprint started, right?
Yeah.
Now, since then, you've launched the Life-Drawn imprint. Mm-hmm. Can you speak more on those, the difference between them and any other imprints that you're developing?
Sure. I mean, H1 was really a chance to get ourselves into the American mainstream because people knew the Ink Owl, people knew Mobius. Not as much of our work was known domestically. So the H1 line, which I credit to outgoing editor Fabrice Sapolsky, was about taking the same sort of ethos, the pushing boundaries, the courage to go after subjects that a lot of other publishers wouldn't touch, and do that kind of material. So that's all fiction, whereas Life-Drawn is more biographical, autobiographical. Stories about real people, stories from anybody from, a guy who ran the New York Marathon with a really interesting backstory to, the true story of Hedy Lamarr, who invented, military technology, which people don't know. So that's where we're drilling down on that stuff as well as our normal sort of Humanoids brand, science fiction, fantasy, in your face, boundary pushing stuff. That's what we're drilling down on now. We don't have any other imprints in development right now, but that's because we really want to get these right.
Now, so much of the work that you are doing, especially the stuff that's been out over the past year or so with H1, is very slice of life and is taking from stories that we've seen in the media. We've seen stuff about school shootings. We've seen things about basically indigenous protests. We've also seen like cult murders and stuff on the horror end of things. Is Humanoids ready to deal with, pandemics, police brutality, killer wasps? Are y'all going in that direction?
Yes. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, I always feel like if you have the ability, you have the responsibility, and we can be a voice that addresses, and we can be a voice that addresses those issues. We can also be a conduit as a publisher for other voices that need to be heard to address those issues. That seems like a good cue to throw it over to Melody for a moment and talk about what you've been able to accomplish in the book you had.
Yeah, thanks. I one of the great things about coming on board to Omni was that Mark was really open to the kind of writing that I do, which is very based in social issues. That's just the kind of writer that I am. I'm kind of an activist in my writing, and so that was great that I've been able to bring those kind of stories to Omni. So Cecilia is someone who wants to save the world and save people, and been able to extend that beyond her her medical, what she does medically, to a political stance as well, and in how she organically meets those in her stories. So whether it's meeting with water workers and a Native American woman who's able to give water to others. And then we also see what Ferguson-like town, so we get to address what's happened in our society that way, or dealing with racism and white supremacy. It's been great to be able to develop these stories where we have this character who is driven by helping others, gets a chance to do that through what we would consider political, but I just consider it really human rights issues.
And actually, Cecilia is actually one of my favorite characters. There's so few Afro-Latinas in comics that I kind of, she resonates with me. But can we talk about briefly what her powers are? Because it's more than just powers of intellect. It's almost like they each have their own personality.
Yeah, she's and that was, and I have had the joy of working with Devin Grayson, who handed off Omni to me, and the way in which we've worked with that intelligence, it's kind of like a hyper awareness, and extremely quick and accurate deductions that she can simultaneously make, and then she's able to, and they're based on these kind of intelligence modalities. So you have mathematical and logical, the ability to figure out, to calculate and figure out based on information that she takes in that way. And then there's kinesthetic and bodily, which has to do, she can observe the way someone moves and figure something out that way. Visual, which is spatial, so how things are laid out, she can also deduce things. Intrapersonal, which is her self-awareness of what's going on for herself, emotionally and otherwise. Interpersonal, where she can pick up on what's going on between others. Even there's there's 9 of them. So there's verbal linguistic, which is verbal linguistic, which is she can, whether it's a foreign language or an accent that someone has, she can pick up information. Musical and rhythmic, which could be everything from the way that water drips and the rate that it drips, and the musicality of someone's voice. Naturalistic, which is our natural world and that information. And probably the one that's very, very different is existential, which is the ability to kind of step back and kind of look at all of that and see how it all fits together. So yeah, there are 9 of them.
You see, my dream is to see Cecilia on CNN, but that's a whole different story. Somebody write that. Now that's an ongoing. Let's talk about some of the newer stuff that the offerings that are coming out. MPLS Sound sounds really interesting to me. Meredith, Joe, can you tell us a little bit about that story?
I'll let Joe go first because he's the mastermind.
I was going to say ladies first because that's how I was raised. But okay, thank you. So MPLS Sound is really the story of Teresa Booker, who's a Black woman who tries to create a funk and soul band in the early 80s in Minneapolis. And really, she grew up inspired by people like Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Hazel and Prince. And it was a meeting with Prince that would really catalyze her goal to create this band, because the idea is that they were going to get a chance to be Prince's band. So this would have been Prince's band instead of and before the revolution. And so in that way, it's historical fiction that has to fit in with our real history. And what was really, I guess, informative for me was that not only did I not really know about the Minneapolis Sound, it was my first editor on the book, Fabrice Bolsky, who's a real Prince expert, who really brought me into that world. and began like the Obi-Wan Kenobi training. And that town was really dominated by rock, and it was dominated by a company named Two Tone Productions. So for Teresa Booker to try to create this band, she was fighting against the odds every day. And that kind of journey story is something that I found really compelling, and that it was really great working with Meredith on bringing to life.
Okay, so you had me at Prince. So whatever it is, I'm buying it because Prince. That's beautiful. Everything you just said is amazing, but you said Prince, so I'm buying it.
Okay, good. Good.
Meredith, what was it like taking on, not just this historical, because you're not just drawing, a stock character. Now you're drawing people from real life.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a little bit daunting?
It was challenging at first. I remember like when I was testing for this project and Fabrice was like, okay, now draw a Prince. And I was like, oh, no. But I kind of came into my own on it, and I learned a lot. And I really feel like, nobody said that I didn't capture Prince, so hopefully I did. But no, it was a great experience. It's also my first graphic novel. So I learned so much working on it. And I feel like I've grown like leaps and bounds since the beginning of it, for sure.
And it sounds like it's a very, it sounds like it's a very collaborative it sounds like it's a very collaborative process. So Joe and Meredith, did you go back and forth, or was your script completely done, Joe, before Meredith got started?
No, it wasn't, because basically what happened is there was a nucleus of an idea, and I was really brought in to flesh it out and turn it into an emotional story. And Meredith and I actually had a Zoom call, or a Skype call it was, before I actually finished the script, because part of being a writer, and Mark can speak to this in comics, is that because it's a collaboration, you're writing to an artist's strengths. And so I ask questions like, what do you like? Like, what do you like in drama? What do you like in character interactions and things like that? And so I wanted it to be something that Meredith would enjoy drawing. And it had to be something, because unlike the nature of superheroes, the compelling drama is all happening in real places, and there's a lot of acting that has to happen. And that was something that she was able to bring across. And what's also really important is the character of Teresa Booker. She's not only a Black woman, but, we're dealing with body diversity. And this was in a time in Minneapolis when colorism was definitely an issue. So that was something that, we talked about, and that really came through. When you see the band, you're going to see all these different types of characters, and that's going to speak to the kind of group of people that it took to challenge the status quo at that time.
Did colorism stop being an issue? Did I miss that memo? Because Ibrahim, I want to talk about the count a little bit, because you're also on this same imprint, and it's a little bit different because the count is a count that we all know, not the Sesame Street one for anybody watching this. So tell us about the count a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a reimagining of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and that's such a sort of the biggest like revenge story that's ever been told, right? And and I'm a sucker for stories about like retribution and comeuppance, and and I love that story. And I always thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if this was presented in a way that was a little more timeless, because the original is in the era of Napoleonic France, and it's you kind of have to be into that aesthetic and to I think really latch on to it. So I had a note to myself from like 3 years ago that was like The Count of Monte Cristo, but sci-fi, and then I kind of took it from there. So essentially, it's about a young merchant courier who is set up by jealous rivals, wrongfully imprisoned. He's sent to this penal colony where they have to fight to the death, and there are just these really sadistic guards and whatnot, and he's able to get free, and with the help of a large amount of money that was left to him by a fellow prisoner, he goes to exact his revenge. But he finds that he returns to the city he's from that's in the middle of this class war, and there's this corrupt sort of presidential regime. And the character's arc is sort of that he learns, this is about more than just me. And so, it deals with revolution as much as it does revenge.
And is it, again, I have a similar question like I had for Meredith, because this is a classic that people already know. Were there certain things that you were worried about, like, I have to make sure that I portray this properly? And were there other things that you just said, I'm not talking about this? Like, were there ways that you were editing it as you went?
Not really. I mean, I knew the type of story I wanted to tell. The original is actually plays out much more like a soap opera than anything. There's not really any sword fights or swashbuckling to it, which I think a lot of people don't realize, because, the same writer obviously created the Three Musketeers, which is all about that stuff. So I really want to inject more sort of action and intrigue into it. So I really just kind of borrowed the framework of the original story, and then kind of modernized it with, the type of storytelling that I really enjoy, in hopes that it would kind of come across as, a little more of an exciting kind of adventure.
Now, I always like to ask this question, because you're both an artist and a writer. Which process do you enjoy more, or which process takes the most out of you?
It's interesting. I love the drawing part. The visuals are, that's how I fell in love with all of this in the first place. I'm finding that, as an artist, you always have the lion's share of the work, right? It's just the math of it. Mm-hmm. Actually breaking the story and figuring out all of the components and fitting them together has been really, really challenging and a huge learning process. So, I have to kind of take a couple steps back from my previous position of, man, writers have it so easy, because it is harder than I anticipated at first.
Now, I want to address, we touched on it a little bit before, but like right now we're sort of in the middle of history. And even though, not just with the pandemic, but also with the murder of George Floyd and all of the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, what is it like creating while all of this is going on? How are you as creators interpreting this? Is it helping your work? Is it hard to be creative in a space like this right now?
For me, it's unique because people may not know, but I'm the one who posted the video of Christian Cooper, the bird watcher in the park, and that incident that went viral. So, and my brother, Chris, wrote with Marvel. He wrote on Starfleet Academy, and he had his own digital book, Queer Nation. And so we're both activists in not only in life but in our art. And so it was interesting to have something like that hit home for me, because I've posted other people's videos that that I've seen that deal with weaponized racism. So to see it hit home like that, it kind of threw me back. But then I got over 44 million views and hundreds of thousands of responses, which was mind-blowing. And it kind of solidified for me how important it is for us in our art to make sure that we address these issues, because we reach people all the time. Even when these moments don't bubble up, we have an opportunity to address it. And especially now. And it was hard. When I had to look at pages, my head was in a different place. It really was. I was going out on protests, but it really helped focus me to be focused on my work and the work that others were doing. And I think it's been a weird time for everybody with COVID too. It's harder to concentrate, it's harder to focus. There's, people are dying, people are protesting. It's an odd time, but I think if we're careful with ourselves and generous with each other, we can come through this in a really strong way to support each other and to let our art and what we create speak to the moment. After we let it settle a bit, because I think you do have to let it percolate to really address it the right way.
Yeah, I do think you have to let it process, because it's first off, it's not a medium that is set up for immediate speaking to an issue. It's a periodical business. We're 2 or 3 months out at any given time, so we always run the risk of, trying to, if we drill down on one point, as we've seen, we have no idea what the world's going to look like 3 months from now. This could, whatever we're addressing right this moment could be a tiny fragment of whatever hell awaits us in September.
It's zombies, Mark. Zombies are next. That's what's happening.
If you had told me for the last 20 years, when we've all been debating how post zombie life would be like in America, how we would really deal with zombies and what life would really be like after a zombie apocalypse, the one thing it never occurred to any of us was, what if zombies were real and people in Georgia refused to accept they existed, even as they were getting their arms gnawed off? So yes.
They actually covered it. Didn't Walking Dead take place in Georgia? But I digress.
Yes. So, to some degree too, as I think that Melly mentioned, or alluded to, comics tend to work better in allegory than they do specificity. In the gun violence book that I'm doing, Ignited, which is the one that really drills down on teen activists dealing with gun violence and trying to do something about it, trying to be heard about it. The next issue that comes out is really about the Trayvon Martin case. I mean, flat out. And the only thing, but rather than deal with that specific incident, because now sadly it's old news. It's taking that same incident, putting new names to it, putting a new context to it, especially given where we are right this second, and being able to do something with that, the emotions I felt when I first heard about the case, and what I wanted to do with it as a writer back then, and what I feel like I can do with it now.
But it does speak to, actually, Ignited does speak to what we're seeing now, because that, even in that book, it's the high school kids that are leading that resistance. And that's what we're seeing now.
That's all the old white guys were like, hey, listen, kids, they're not going to be able to organize actual protests. Look at them. They're just kids. Well, Jesus, they know more about social media than any of you idiots. They're going to nail it. And they're what continues to excite me and impress me as the oldest guy on this panel is I have never seen the youth of America more mobilized and more focused and with more sustained focus than I have seen this year. And that is one of the things that does give me hope for the future.
And I wanted to add, there's something else that I see that's unique is the global response, especially to the anti-racism protests. I get messages from Ghana, from Korea, from France, from the UK, and then to see those protests in the UK and all in Berlin and all over the world, it's a global movement, and it's fascinating to see.
I am also curious about the way we're delivering comics now. Because a lot the industry is in a quiet uproar over kind of Diamond and DC, and they're sort of, falling out a little bit. And so many, comic book shops had to close because of the, COVID-19. So there's been a lot of digital, a lot of online, and it's sort of changing the way people are also getting their comics. And a lot of artists and writers have jumped into webcomics as well. Is there an idea, or is Humanoids going to be looking into different ways of delivering their stories as well in the future?
Oh yeah. I mean, we probably will not looking at going full digital all the time at any point in the future. as Joe knows as well, I've been pushing digital comics and been right there at the forefront of trying to make that happen since since for the last 10 years or so, and as so many other people have been doing. And what I've learned is that print comics and print graphic novels are not going away. I mean, they're so inculcated into American culture and American pop culture that the print editions are not going away, which is fine. So I think that as long as there is an avenue to reach people with our messages, with the things that we want to say, whether it is print, whether it is digital, whether it's printing them on egg cartons, I don't care, as long as the message gets out there.
And also across social media, we're seeing so many companies come forward and say, we are looking at our hiring practices again. We're making sure that our talent roster is more diverse. We're making sure that our stories are more diverse. Humanoids is kind of already doing that. So what are some of the other changes or ideas that Humanoids is moving forward with to make sure that to answer that call that we're seeing across social media?
Well, I think it's really important, as you say, it's really important that we not be just a bunch of old white guys telling stories. I mean, that's believe me, I've been as you mentioned early on, I've been in the comics since the Pleistocene era. And so I have heard every old white guy talk about what they want to do forever, and I'm kind of tired of us. So, I mean, when we started the H1 line, we made a specific effort to be inclusive, to reach out to creators who were not normally heard or were not normally represented. And I think that did well for us. I think that felt, whether or not it did, tremendously well financially or on a business level, it felt good. It felt like the right thing to do. And we will continue in that vein. I mean, there's no reason not to. It's not just a matter of, there's a fiscal angle to it, in the sense that that's your audience, for Christ's sake. Your audience is no longer a bunch of just white guys. You've got to reach the audience that's out there. But beyond that, it's not just the money. It's not just keeping the business alive. It's that's what is the right thing to do. And those are the voices that need to be heard. And if we can do anything in Humanoids, if as publisher, I can make anything happen, if it's simply giving more platforms to more people, that's a win.
Now, for the creators here, I know your boss is in the room, but I'm curious, do you feel that in terms of your creative process, that Humanoids gives you a voice, whereas I'm not trying to poo-poo any other comic book imprint, but I'm just saying, do you feel you really have a part of a creative process here, that your voice is heard all the way to the time that the book comes out?
If I can chime in, once, guys.
Yeah. Well, I, as someone who's got the privilege to be able to write and draw my own books there, I've had nothing but free reign to pretty much do whatever. If anything, notes might be like, hey, let's push this further, So, and it's really refreshing, because in Count, I try to address a lot of things, to sort of call back to your question earlier about how we deal with everything that's going on and be creative. One of the few things you feel like you can really assert any kind of control over is what you put into your work. And so I think for me, it's served a lot of catharsis to, we're going to topple a corrupt regime in this book, So yeah, in that respect, like I really feel a lot of creative freedom and support in that vein.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely attest. I used to work in video games, so I went from one male-dominated industry to the next. But I'm so grateful that Fabrice found me and I found him, and he was able to give me so many opportunities. I've done a few small things for the H1 line as well, and even then, I felt like I had a lot of artistic freedom to kind of play with things in the way that I felt were, as long as I could explain why I did it. Editors have always been very great and understanding and supportive, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Melody.
No, go ahead, Jack.
Oh, okay. To back up what people are saying, I kind of feel like MPLS Sound is a book that you wouldn't see at another company, right? And this, it's interesting. Like, keeping it real, things are really bad, but I get up every morning inspired because I feel like stories are powerful. People need them more than ever. And we need to remind ourselves that there's something to get up in the morning for. And so a story about a Black woman fighting against the system is evergreen, right? If 10 years from now, this story is going to apply. And so the universal themes, I think, are what's going to connect us. Like, basically, we have two Americas that are at war. We have America that is the dream, and we have America that may be this ugly reality. And so these stories are the fight, right, for the dream, right? And so a company like Humanoids, being able to put them all together under one house, it's really great. And it's really an honor to work for that company.
Melody, you were going to say?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. This is my first comic book, so I'm very humbled to be in the company of all of you, and very grateful to have a space and a place to voice my concerns as an artist and as a human being. I've always felt supported from the very first moments that I connected with Mark, Waid, and with Fabrice, and with Devin Grayson and Rob Levin, and everyone that I've dealt with, and the artists, just very supported in getting the message and the story that I wanted to out there. And comic books are unique also in that, I work in television and film, and there's so many different components there as well, but especially there can be, the network can decide, well, we're not quite sure about that message. And here I felt that there was such trust from the very beginning, the inception of my starting, that we're supporting the message that you want to get out there, the stories that you want to tell. And that the writer really has along with the editor, obviously, and publisher, but that there was such trust in what the writer's vision is, and really supporting that and getting that out as clearly as possible. And that's I find very, very wonderful and unique and very freeing. And I really love working in comic books as a result.
I'm glad you feel that way. But don't anybody feel like they have to be grateful to us or indebted to us in any way, shape, or form, because that's the job. I mean, that's what we should be doing. That's always been my philosophy: is hire the right people, give them something to say. Let them say give them a place to say what they want to say, and then get the hell out of the way. I'm not interested as a publisher, or have been as an editor, to nickel and dime you. The best I can do is maybe help guide you in communicating through the medium, because I know the medium so well after all this time, and maybe I can help you use the tools a little bit better. But that's all I'm interested in doing, is giving you a megaphone and letting you go.
And honestly, Mark, that's the best stories are told that way. So I can see that you're leading from the middle. You're leading from inside, and that's amazing. What final question? Aside of the zombies and the killer wasp and possibly the locusts,
right?
What are you looking for? What are you hoping for with Humanoids right through the end of 2020?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to push on like we have. We've like everybody else, our publishing schedule has been a little interrupted by some of this. So we're coming back strong in the fall, and we're coming back strong with MPLS Sound and the Count. Sorry, I keep getting it wrong, Ibrahim. Sorry. And we've got other things in development that are specifically done with a mind toward inclusivity, with an attitude towards, again, giving people who feel disenfranchised or feel marginalized, giving them a chance to have their say, because those are the stories that need to be told right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for allowing me to moderate this amazing conversation. And I can't wait to see more of the work that comes out of Humanoids.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.